Who are you and what do you do with the Admirals? Just providing a brief introduction for the listeners.
Sure. So my name is Heather Miyamoto. I don't know if I have an official title, but really kind of like oversee operations for Dyron and kind of like assist him. I think originally I was brought on to be like more of an executive assistant. But with my operations background, I really am a resource for planning trips, planning the budget, planning kind of fundraising, anything that funnels through Elizabeth, who does the money, and through operations of the actual facility and the teams themselves.
And then how has what you do with the Admirals changed your perspective on baseball, specifically youth and travel baseball as a whole?
Well, the Admirals, I would have to say, is probably the most elevated or the most advanced program that I've been a part of. My background really comes from both of my boys playing Little League here in Benicia, and then our local travel team here is Benicia Wolfpack. So Wolfpack started, I don't even know how many years ago, but it really started as like one or two teams and then grew to anywhere from 10 to 12 teams. They really just had one team of each age group, and both boys started playing with Wolfpack, and then I joined the board for the Wolfpack and became the treasurer. So I probably spent about 5 years working on their board and helping them facilitate very much the same thing: tryouts, tournaments, right? The budget for each team, fundraising, ordering uniforms, a lot of what we do at Admirals. So I had that background. And then when the boys went to high school, it was time for something different, really, to kind of elevate their game. So Wyatt tried out for Admirals when he was 12, which is my oldest, and he played for them for a year. And then they both returned in high school, I want to say when they were like 14 or 15. And then by them trying out and making the teams, I started to become involved in the process and how things were working. And, I think I started more as like a team mom or just helping with events and certain things. And then my involvement grew from there. So it's just such a bigger scope and a bigger process than any other group that we had ever been a part of.
And then talking about your sons and heading in that direction, how did your sons get into baseball, and did they play any other sports growing up?
Oh, yeah. So they played, I would probably say every sport growing up when they were, elementary school. Both of my boys played soccer. They did basketball, I want to say, for, one season. They did not play football till they were in high school. And then t-ball and baseball. I want to say there might have been karate or martial arts in there at some point, dabbled. I really just wanted them to really try everything until they really found what they loved to do and what they were most passionate about. So really, it was always baseball the longest. The others were kind of spring or local city sports, just to, try out and see how they did. They're not super tall, so basketball was not really an option. They're both actually pretty good soccer players. They have speed and agility. It's just so hard. It's such a hard sport. So I feel like baseball was just where they both gravitated. So that's what they've stuck with as far as the longest or the most consistent, I'll say. They didn't play any other sports at a travel capacity. Everything else was local.
And then kind of going off of that, what do you think were the biggest benefits and challenges through going through multiple sports and then ultimately leading to them continuing with baseball?
I think the biggest challenge with playing multiple sports is time management, right? So when you're committed to playing a sport and being on a team, you should be at every practice and everything that team has scheduled. And when you play multiple sports in the same season, that becomes really difficult. So we used to try to, alternate, right? Do a spring sport and a fall sport so that they didn't overlap. I think the other risk is that they don't ever get a break, right? And it's hard. You're tired. So they go to school, they're children, right? They want to have a social life or have friends and go to birthday parties, right? Or travel, and then you also want to play sports. So being able to balance all of those things becomes really hard and challenging. So I think making sure that it's not too much, but the right amount, and letting them dictate like how much they want to be involved and the level of which they want to be involved, not the parent dictating that.
And then what role did coaching play in the development and overall experience for both of your sons with baseball?
I think coaching played a pretty huge part. My husband only like helped out as a coach when they were really little, like the T-ball age, right, or little league. And then because I think there's an importance in having a coach that's not a parent of a child on your team. That's really why we broke away from Wolfpack. Benicia here in town was run by all the dads of the kids that were playing. Not that they didn't have experience or play baseball in their past. The term daddy ball comes into play quite often. So that was another reason why we looked to go to a different organization, and mainly the Admirals, was there was actual coaches that were coaching the team and the boys that did not have players on the team. They didn't have children there. So an elevated coaching staff that has, experience and knowledge about the game and player development, and is looking at the team, really without any kind of rose-colored glasses, right? Or, bias, because, they're looking at how to improve each player and how to make the team better, not just how to make their own child better. So the coaching aspect and having like a really knowledgeable coach was really important to us outside of, just being a parent.
And then kind of going off of like a similar question for that, in terms of the Admirals club culture, how do you think having coaches like Coach D, Coach O, Vinny, and Brian help influence and promote growth amongst young players as well as players transitioning into college?
I think they're great examples of that. I think all of them provide a different aspect of, expectations for the game and like knowledge of what, they want to teach and develop the boys to do. And even my oldest, Wyatt, today, he's in Washington playing. Vinny will call him and just check in. So there's a relationship and a bond that's beyond, baseball. He'll check in on how the, games were and how he played, but he also just checks in on him as, a friend, and how school and, all those aspects and things that they know are hard when you're away from home. So I think they each kind of have a different part of that. Even, being home for break or something, Wyatt will go in and hit in the ace or stop by a practice. And he's always welcome back, just from, it could be months, right, that they haven't talked or seen him. And it's just like he falls right back into those old ways. So I think they all contribute differently to kind of life beyond baseball, not just on the baseball field, but beyond that as well. I think having those relationships and networks will even help once he graduates, right, and beyond the baseball field. But they're very important.
And then kind of going into the recruiting process, how was the recruiting process for Wyatt versus how the recruiting process is now for Beckett, and just kind of with the whole NIL and everything else that's kind of been implemented into recruiting now?
Yeah. It definitely is different, I would say. For Wyatt, he had... I'm trying to think what happened. So, like, he started out, like, freshman, sophomore, fall classic, traveling, getting interest here and there. And then he was also playing football in high school. And then his junior year, right before going to the junior fall classic, he blew out his MCL and his MPFL while scoring a touchdown on the football field. So he had surgery in October of his junior year, so he did not go to the junior fall classic, which I think definitely, lowered the visibility for him, not playing in the fall as much as he did in the summer, and having to go through that recovery as a catcher, primary catcher. luckily that injury, the MCL and the MPFL, is the shortest of the recoveries. So within 6 months, he was actually back on the baseball field for spring. So in February, March, he returned for his junior high school season, and was able to play, and then hit recruiting really strong the summer leading into his senior year, because he didn't really get a ton of visibility his junior year. So recruiting, like every tournament, like luckily he just had a really strong summer, a really standout summer. And then senior fall classic, like just the interest came. So he went on at least 3 official visits out of state, had multiple, I'd probably say 6 to 9 offers between junior college and D2 offers. But he didn't get any offers in California to play. So he did want to stay as close to home as he could, but I think Washington was the closest as far as the offers he got. So he had options with really good grades. He also was weighing the option of not playing baseball in college, and applied at a lot of UCs and schools as a student to see what his options were and where he was admitted, just to weigh the option of just going to school to go to college. So he was waiting pretty long. I mean, all his offers came in the fall, and he did not commit until April of his high school senior season. He just wanted to wait and see what his, where every school that he got into was, so that he could make a sound decision. So he kept everybody at bay as much as he could, but that was really hard too. Those relationships with all the coaches that were recruiting him are checking in on a, every 2 week to 3 week basis, and wanting calls and statuses on how it's going. And if he's made a decision, they're filling roster spots. So you're running the risk of not having a spot that you were offered if you take too long to commit. And he just was so indecisive and could not decide until what felt like the last minute. So his was a pretty long process, I would have to say. But he's very happy at the school that he chose. So he's just started the sophomore year there. For Beckett, being a senior, I mean, his interest really just started this summer after Boz, which was the Bay Area World Series down in at Islander. And most of the calls and interest came from that. And there's really only been one primary coach that's expressed interest and given him an official offer. So right now his decision isn't, a huge decision with only having one opportunity, but going to Arizona, we wanted to wait and kind of weigh out what options came from there, and then see what the fall brings.
And then kind of transitioning into the other side of baseball and technology in terms of recruiting as well. How has the game of baseball changed with technology, and what the Admirals are doing with G6 in terms of performance training?
I definitely think that's evolved. I know like the G6 group and kind of like doing all their numbers and providing kind of like their stats as far as strength and things. Wyatt didn't have that, and that was just 2 years ago. They had gears, right, where they were doing like training and doing different statistics and numbers. But I think it's definitely evolved and gotten better, knowing that there's TrackMan and all the other, technology that's in the ACE for them to use and kind of take that information and get better. It's evolved significantly, I have to say, at least from when they started. I mean, there never even used to be an ACE when we started there. So Wyatt played at Beckett Christian out on their field at night after they were done with the field. So they didn't even have a facility. And then there was times where, Wilsey Wood and other local fields where we would practice. So, building the ACE and having now 2 facilities has changed, their ability to do more overtime for sure.
And then kind of circling back to getting to watch your sons go through the baseball process and for playing and recruiting and kind of where they are now, what has been the most rewarding part of that and watching them grow through the sport of baseball?
Gosh, baseball is such a game of loss, and I'd say just watching them kind of learn and develop over the years, and know that they're not going to get a hit every single game, or they're not going to potentially make that they will make an error, and it's still going to be okay. Both of them have been able to be positive and learn from each game and consistently get better, and to be able to reset for the next game and not carry those thoughts with you from game to game. Because I think that's what can get hard. That mental game of baseball is really hard, I think, for a lot of players. And I think watching my kids, learn as they've played over the years and develop into stronger people and mentally be able to wrap their head around, what happened in the game, or maybe like break down video from a hit and take parts and pieces out that went really well and parts that they need to get better, and keep working at it every day is probably the most rewarding part. And seeing success, right? Like seeing them have those moments as they hit a home run or they have those days where it's just a great game, makes it all worth it.
Yes. And then kind of wrapping up, what advice would you give to parents who are starting the process of either recruiting or the travel ball process for their kids?
I would say advice for the travel ball process is, asking a lot of questions so that it's clear up front, what you're signing up for, so that you can't, play the card at the end that you didn't get what you wanted out of it. So as long as the costs and, what the summer or the travel time is going to look like, then it won't be a surprise. So make sure, and to make sure that you don't want to do that more than your child wants to do it, whether it's your son or your daughter, right? They have to be the one asking to take their game to the next level, and that they want to travel and explore it. You can definitely weigh in, but if you want it more than them, it's really just not going to be worth the time or the money. With the recruiting process, there's so many ups and downs, I think, in the recruiting process. So just, being as supportive as possible, like reminding your player of, to say, to send thank yous after, interviews or after official visits or things like that, and to communicate things and post videos, like to keep content current. Because I think a lot of players think that they can just sit and wait for the phone to ring and everybody will come to them, that there's a lot of work involved on the other side, and that, initiating conversations or initiating emails to schools that you want to go to, we own that process just as much as our coaches help us. But not every coach is going to come to you. So it's definitely a two-way street, and requires a lot of work and time.